The woman's hands and feet were tied behind her back, lying on the ground, with a thick cloth gagging her mouth, preventing her from making any sound. Even when a friend called, she could only watch helplessly. At this moment, a man entered the room and started undressing without saying a word. No matter how much the woman struggled, it was useless. What happened next would be a nightmare for her life. The woman's name was Zhao Qing, a woman with a hard life. Her mother passed away, her father couldn't take care of himself, and she divorced her husband while raising a child. To cover her living expenses, she had to take jobs at night. That night's client was named Li Mu, who wore glasses and looked gentle and refined. Li Mu invited Zhao Qing to get in the car and go to his house. Zhao Qing didn't think much of it. In the car, Li Mu suddenly asked if the missing girl had been found, which surprised Zhao Qing. Half a year ago, her good friend Xiaoming disappeared and there was still no trace of her. The car stopped in a remote area. After arriving home, Li Meng took out a bundle of rope and suggested trying something new. This made Zhao Qing feel uneasy, but she didn't want to refuse directly, so she suggested taking a shower first. She locked the door, took out her phone, turned on the faucet, and called her boss, Ming Zhe, saying that Li Meng looked a lot like the man from the night Xiaoming disappeared. However, she couldn't describe the exact location, but from the sounds, it seemed like there was a farmer's market nearby. She hung up the phone. Zhao Qing quickly wet her hair to pretend she had just showered. Meanwhile, Ming Zhe and his brothers were on their way. Zhao Qing cautiously walked out of the room and was about to open the door to leave. When Zhao Qing woke up again, she was already tied up on the ground. Ming Zhe and his brothers wandered around the market but couldn't find Li Mu's location. Calls kept coming in, but the bound Zhao Qing couldn't answer them and could only watch as the calls ended. Li Mu entered the room, took off his clothes, and the scene at the beginning happened. When Zhao Qing woke up from unconsciousness again, she was already locked in an iron cage. Not far away, 3 young women were eating. No matter how much noise she made, the 3 women just glanced at her and none of them came forward to help. When everyone fell asleep, a girl came over with a bowl of water. At this moment, Xiao Qing finally saw clearly that it was her friend Xiao Meng, who had been missing for half a year. Xiao Meng reminded Xiao Qing not to make any noise and gave her some water. Just then, a sound came from behind, and Xiao Meng quickly left with the bowl, leaving Xiao Qing in despair. After 2 days and nights, Li Mu cut the ropes binding her, carried her into a room, and placed her on the living room sofa. Then, he brought a basin of hot water and used a towel to wipe the dirt off her face. Xiao Qing picked up the rice and started eating. During these 2 days, Li Mu wasn't idle either. He investigated Xiao Qing's details, her father's situation, where they lived, where her daughter was, and which kindergarten she attended. Here, do your job well, and your family will be safe. Xiao Qing was trembling with fear, but she didn't give up hope of escaping. When Li Mu wasn't home, she desperately shouted outside. But in this remote wilderness, even if she shouted until her voice was hoarse, it was useless. For the sake of her family, she had to eat and survive. Soon, her first job came. In the evening, the women got ready for work, putting on beautiful and sexy clothes. Xiao Long applied exquisite makeup on Xiao Qing. Then, as Xiao Qing was taken away by Li Mu, he handed her a bugging device to hide in her underwear. Before getting out of the car, Li Mu reminded Xiao Qing again that if she followed his instructions, no one would get hurt. On the way, Xiao Qing saw others but didn't dare to speak. She followed the instructions to the designated room. Li Mu monitored the entire transaction with headphones. After it was completed, Xiao Qing returned, looking lost and dejected. All the income had to be handed over. To prevent Xiao Qing's father from starving, Li Mu allowed her to buy things for home, but she could only drop them off and leave without saying a word. On the way, they encountered some young people. It was a perfect opportunity to call for help. As soon as Xiao Qing shouted for help, Li Mu covered her mouth and said it was just a couple's quarrel. Then, he quickly took Xiao Qing away, and the crowd didn't suspect anything. The car drove all the way to the desolate wilderness. Li Mu took a hammer and dragged Xiao Qing out of the car. He said he would smash Xiao Qing's jaw no matter what. Then, Li Mu took out a photo of Xiao Qing's daughter. From then on, Xiao Qing completely integrated with them like a family, eating together and getting more and more orders. When bored, they would joke and play around. The client that day was a bespectacled man who looked quite respectable. Xiao Qing felt this was a good opportunity. He quickly locked the door, first asking the client not to speak, then wrote a message for help on a piece of paper. The client thought it was a new trick. This made Li Mu realize something was wrong. He quickly came to the door of the room and heard knocking from outside. Xiao Qing hurriedly swallowed the paper. Li Mu looked around but didn't notice anything unusual. Zha asked up front, "Who exactly is he?" As a result, he was beaten up. The client instantly became cowardly. In the car, Xiao Qing was trembling all over with fear. To test if Xiao Qing really wanted to escape, on the way, Li Mu asked him to get out of the car to buy popsicles. It was clearly not a good place to escape, so Xiao Qing didn't dare to act. It seemed the training plan was almost complete. In the evening, Li Mu took Xiaoqing home. After dawn, he was sent back by Li Mu. The girl in purple stood up, very displeased. After spending a long time together, he fell in love with Li Mu. He was very jealous of Xiaoqing's violation last night, thinking Xiaoqing must be seducing Li Mu. He kept getting angry at Xiaoqing. The noise quickly attracted Li Mu. Everyone was terrified. Li Mu came in directly with a burlap sack. Li Mu threw the sack on the ground. The girl looked terrified. The girl shook her head continuously in fear because she knew very well what it meant to go inside. She looked at Xiaoqing, hoping he would plead for her. But Xiaoqing remained indifferent. Li Mu grabbed her hair, pressed her to the ground, and stuffed her into the sack. Then he dragged her out by her legs. After hanging the sack up, Li Mu took off his clothes, put on blood-stained leather boots, tied on a leather apron, took a large iron rod from the wall, and beat the sack violently. The girl soon fell silent. Li Mu, covered in blood, sat beside, panting heavily. Blood dripped down from the sack. The blood quickly flowed to Li Mu's feet. Afraid of dirtying his boots, he hurriedly moved his feet back. That day, the client with glasses was enjoying himself and started talking about what happened with Xiaoqing. He still thought it was Xiaoqing's trick. As he spoke, he threw the small card with Xiaoqing's name and address on the ground. The person enjoying himself nearby was Ming. He picked up the small card from the ground, immediately gathered his brothers, and set off. Soon, they arrived in the area where Li Mu was located. Unfamiliar with the terrain, they asked someone for directions by the roadside and happened to find Li Mu. Seeing they were up to no good, Li Mu casually pointed them to another place. Since they had already come looking, even though he had just deceived them, this place was definitely exposed. Li Mu returned to the room, picked up an axe, and sat on the sofa. He was sweating profusely. Soon, there was a commotion at the door. Several big men came in with wooden sticks. But suddenly, the lights in the room went out. After a series of crashes, the room fell silent. Xiaoqing was waiting to set off but still couldn't see Li Mu. He looked out through the iron window and saw blood flowing down. Xiaoqing was immediately terrified. Inside the room, Li Mu, familiar with the terrain, successfully took out all the men. Afterwards, he still took Xiaoqing to take orders. Walking in the hotel corridor, Xiaoqing suddenly stopped. Staying any longer would only lead to a dead end, so he might as well escape early. He threw the bugging device directly on the ground. Realizing something was wrong, Li Mu quickly rushed into the hotel. Xiaoqing ran out through the back door of the hotel. Unable to find anyone, Li Mu also left the hotel. Seeing a billiard shop, he went inside. Seeing the flickering eyes ahead, Li Mu was sure Xiaoqing was there. He casually picked up a ball from the billiard table. Where is he? The receptionist glanced at the main door. Li Mu opened the door and walked out. After confirming Li Mu had gone far, Xiaoqing used a borrowed phone to call the police and reported that 2 girls were still locked up there. Then, Xiaoqing returned home. As he turned on the light, he was stunned. His father was already dead on the floor. Li Mu was sitting in their home. Then, Xiaoqing was tied up and taken back. Li Mu put on an apron and boots. Then, he dragged 16 sacks to the corner. As he turned around, the police had already arrived. Xiao Meng and another girl were rescued. Xiaoqing, who always wanted to escape, died inside. The movie, Imprisonment Storm, concludes here. This film is based on a true event in Luoyang, Henan. Although some people may seem harmless, they can be utterly ruthless behind the scenes. Sometimes, you really can't take risks with people. Also, I hope everyone stays safe when going out. Alright, if you want to see more great movie reviews, please follow me. See you later.
Yeah.